Lead Time is a podcast of the Unite Leadership Collective, hosted by Tim Allman and Jack Caliberg. Lead Time taps into biblical wisdom for practical solutions to today's burning issues. Each podcast confronts real-time struggles facing the local church in a post-Christian culture. Step into the action with the ULC at uniteleadership.org. This is Lead Time.
Welcome to Lead Time. Tim Allman here with Jack Caliberg.
Hey.
Today we are talking about the circuit, the role of the circuit. Jack, you know my doctorate
not
was in
electrical circuits. We're talking about in our synodical context.
There we go. Thank you for clarifying. Yeah. So the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod is made up of congregations who organize themselves mostly geographically. We have a couple of our districts that are non-geographic. But the other 33 are all geographic districts with respective circuits. The amount of circuits per district may depend on, it depends on the size and of the individual congregations, making up voting electorate delegates,
and it may
right?
span 1 to 2 to 3 states, depending on kind of how it was set up initially. Some are big, some are a little bit smaller, right?
Right. And there needs to be a certain number of members for a voting circuit. And I can't even remember off the top of my head how many members. If you're a district president, you obviously know make up a voting circuit. So for us in the East Valley of Phoenix, we have kind of a super circuit, about 12 congregations here in the East Valley that connect, but only 8 of us are in the voting circuit, which is like Circuit 29 of the Pacific Southwest District. And then the other 5 congregations or so that come and hang out with us are a part of the Tucson Circuit for voting rights, so that they have the right numbers. We're not here to talk about voting and numbers. We're here to talk about how circuit congregations start to work together more consistently. And let's kick it off like this, Jack. You had a couple questions that allows us to think a little bit bigger picture for how a circuit could start to reimagine its future.
Right. And you've thought a ton about this, but I'm going to kind of throw these 2 questions out here. So question 1 is, what would an ideal perfect circuit look like in terms of interaction and what they do for each other? And then what would an ideal circuit visitor, a circuit leader, look like in terms of his role and how he's equipped and the skills that he has and what he's doing on a kind of a week-to-week basis? So I'm going to kind of throw those 2 questions out there. Maybe we start first and foremost, like, if we had, and we're leaning into this topic, but if we had the power to reshape all of the circuits and it looked different tomorrow, how would a circuit look different? So why don't you start talking about that, Tim?
Yeah.
How should a circuit look different?
Yep. I think one of two options, because I think human beings love choices, right? We don't want to mandate things, but we could kind of create a framework, 2 different types of frameworks. One would be that there were 8 congregations, all uniquely named and branded with their own kind of value sets and mission statements and objectives, their unique kind of cultures and demographics that they serve. So Christ Greenfield is different than Gethsemane. But then at the very same time, they start to, in concert with what has already been set up in our structure, the circuit forum and convocations, start to have some wider goals that they're trying to hit in terms of leaders raised up, maybe new ministry started, and systems that they create for maybe leadership development that spans all of the churches. That would be unbelievable. And then out of that, the last thing could be that they have some sort of a shared brand for engaging the wider community with whatever the churches of kind of their wider mission. And there's an external facing reality to that. So one story we heard recently in the Southeastern District is there's something called C10, literally means the circuit number 10, but C10, C-10 is a cooler brand. And so they are a whole host of congregations that have come together to say, here are our respective objectives, and even start to market out C10 rather than just St. Peter's or St. Paul's Lutheran within that respective circuit. So that's one model. And I think that's very, very doable. That's very doable. Yeah.
In that model, Tim, and I'm going to break it apart again. So we're going to use these kind of the three things that I like to lean in of culture, structure, system. Mm-hmm. And let's just say we've got this collaborative circuit then. So what is the circuit doing as a entity that's shaping culture, structure, and system for the local congregations? How might that be impacted?
Yeah, so the system of leadership development, there's a whole host of ways that you could move into very practical and deeply theological leadership development for your upward draft of leaders.
So you may be able to share systems,
yes,
right?
A shared system for leadership development, even, and I would make the case all the way up to ordination at the local level. There are other, and we've been teasing this out, and I think for some folks it's hard to kind of get their mind wrapped around in terms of the system or structure of HR, communications, that there's a shared cost. Back office, right? That's really easy to think about. And man, think about the average size congregation in the LCMS, in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, worshiping maybe 60, 70 people. If there was a shared back office, not just for HR, but for communications, for video, for social media, a lot of that, man, they could start, if you will, outkicking their coverage or playing at another level, even though they're a smaller congregation. I think that's a huge win. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm thinking about, I'm going to give Christ Greenfield as a context. We have roughly right now $6 million budget between church and school. So we've had to build up an accounting department and an HR department. And let's say we were partnering with another church in the circuit and they had $100,000 budget. Well, that's not really like a tremendous amount of extra effort it would take for Christ Greenfield to take that on. We could take that on and it would be kind of a minimal impact to our scale. It'd be huge for them. That's a lot of work. So something that could be, a modest increase in effort for one church might be a huge barrier to overcome for a smaller church. And so why not just do that? Why not kind of come to an agreement where you could share resources and maybe the smaller churches is agreeing to, just give some sort of a modest, a modest fee, or I wouldn't even call it a fee, but just a contribution for the fact that they're helping to cover this back office expense, right? So you may find that that's way more efficient than having to train your own accounting department, because a lot of these things, there absolutely is an economies of scale, right? You got to raise up a treasurer, or somebody that's functioning that way, they may be, creating a whole system of internal controls and all that kind of stuff can be just as cumbersome for the small entity as it is for the big one. Why not take advantage of what the big one has done and has tested because it's doing thousands of transactions, right? And just kind of use the best practices that they've put into place.
It seems like a duh, and I'm going to tell you the barrier to this is the insecurity and competitive nature of a lot of our pastors.
Yeah.
And we love, and I think this is more
what happens
our
if
American.
we lose our autonomy? I think that's kind of the fear maybe of a local congregation, right?
Yeah. Are they going to do it like we would do it? And the reality is a lot of the stuff we're talking about right now, if you're a smaller church, you're not doing it.
Right.
And
or not doing it
I'm sorry, not doing it well. I'm sorry to get like super pragmatic, but people are by nature consumers. And you engage them first as a consumer, and then you move them to a contributor, right, Jack? And in the consumer marketplace, and I'm not a big church, our church is kind of larger, I guess, but like I think the future is a lot of smaller expressions of word and sacrament. But in the consumer market today, smaller churches are having a very, very hard time letting the community know they're there. We were just working with a congregation recently and when they look for you, a smaller church leader or even medium-sized church leader, where are they going first? What's your front door, Jack?
Your website. is the front
Your
door
website.
of the church. Absolutely. Right. And possibly reviews that people would have read about you on Google and Facebook. That's your front door. So
Exactly.
have you cultivated, and do you know how to do that as a small church, right? Or can you lean on the systems? Again, there's that word. Can you lean on the systems that another church has already kind of figured out? They've already paid the dumb tax on some things. Not to say, for example, that Christ Greenfield has everything figured out, but we hold the things that we learn very loosely, and we want to be able to give that away to people. So, and that's really kind of the genesis of the culture of what we're doing with ULC. Everybody here that's ULC is a practitioner, and we pay the dumb tax because we're build, measuring, and learning all the time, right?
Yeah. And it's just fun. Like working with other people with diverse perspectives, diverse contexts, diverse size of ministry. Like it's just fun. What are your values? What is the beauty of the smaller expression of word and sacrament? Like that value needs to shape those of us who are in larger contexts, like knowing people, deeply loving and caring for people, doing shepherding work, caring for the homebound, the sick, the suffering, the dying. What a lot of times the personal pastoral connection that happens in the smaller congregation, like that influences me as a larger church pastor to know I got to be with my people. If I'm not loving and caring for them, like so that's just one example of the ways we love and shape one another at the circuit level. There's no better than, it's just different.
Let me give an example. So earlier this week, yesterday actually, we had an opportunity to coach with another church, and they're very different than we are in terms of the demographics that they're reaching. Their city looks very different. And so one of the fears, I think the autonomy fears, is, hey, we've got our own DNA, we got our own values. And what we're saying is collaboration does not require you to sacrifice those things that make you a special church and help you reach the local community. Really what it does, if it's done well, it helps you to be the best version of what God has intended you to be. And so, for instance, that church, they have to be amazing. For them to be the best church possible, they have to be amazing at reaching 50-year-olds, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Other churches have to be amazing at hitting 30-year-olds with kids.
That's right.
And that's going to look different, and they're going to embrace different values and prioritize different things. But how do you think through that? Does your accounting system change because you're hitting a different demographic? Do you have a different church engagement model? This is one of the things, Tim, you and I would like to share, the church engagement model. Well, no, it's the jobs are the same, but how you express them may be very different depending on the audience you're going after. But have you thought through that with intentionality, and do you have the right resources? And that's where collaboration can come in, right?
Gosh, yes. Just so much better. So you asked, let's reimagine the circuit. And I gave you one model. It's kind of maybe a shared umbrella brand with maintaining the unique names and cultures of our unique congregation. So that's one. If you were really starting from scratch and you had national and then district leadership who said, we really want to own, for instance, Phoenix. And we want there to be one way that the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod expresses itself in unique contexts, but sharing kind of these core DNA tenets. So I think if you could redo it right now, if you had high trust, high accountability, strong, humble leadership, I think the multi-site approach for a circuit could be the best way to. So there's one brand. All 7 or 8 churches here in the East Valley have one respective brand. We, unfortunately, in the marketplace, the consumer marketplace of churches, especially in Phoenix and maybe Dallas and places where it's not as, far secular, post-Christian, there still is this kind of mega church movement. We unfortunately are, the brand of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod gets kind of muffled in the very, very strategic way that a lot of our non-denominational brothers and sisters are coming together. One example is the Redemption Network of churches here in the Valley. Their goal is, I don't know, they want dozens, and I can't remember the amount of churches, but dozens of churches in Arizona. They're basically
I believe they're at 11 right now, statewide.
They're at 11.
So you might look at them and say, okay, well, they're non-denominational, but they've set core tenets, core theological tenets that all the congregations agree to, and they share a brand, they share central operations, they share a media department, they share a back office. But the expression locally can vary wildly from wealthy, suburban mega site to inner city, smaller, poor income, maybe more mostly minority site, to, hey, I've seen them up in Flagstaff. They're operating out of an old restaurant. You know what I mean? So there's no limitation on size. There can even be diversity even within a shared brand and a shared values and shared structure. So in this case, they've got everything in common. They've got culture, they've got structure, and they've got systems all in common. Right, a little bit more rigid than the model that you said is the first model. But here's the beauty of it: if I'm living it, let's say I had a wonderful experience because of the healthy culture, structure, and systems that were set up in one church, and then I moved to Flagstaff. Oh, I know that church. I can expect the same kind of spiritual services, the same kind of worship experience, the same kind of discipleship experience there as I got down in Phoenix or in Gilbert. So now you have this brand equity that you've created, rather than having to divide your brand across 12 different brands that a person has to choose from. Are your brands competing with each other, or are they complementing each other? Isn't that an interesting thought?
It is, and I hear some folks right now saying, "But isn't the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod our umbrella brand for all of our churches that kind of connect all of our churches?" What would you say to that, Jack?
It might be a brand for somebody who is, 3 to 6 generations Lutheran. And Tim, you and I have walked through this with the rebranding of Christ Greenfield. The legal name for Christ Greenfield remains Christ Greenfield Lutheran Church. But the public-facing name now is Christ Greenfield. And why did we make that decision? Because unfortunately, what the word Lutheran means to an LCMS member means something really, really different than some of the target audiences that we're going after, the people that might be unchurched or came from a different theological background, but need exactly what we're prepared to preach to them, right? So we're trying to be outward facing. We're trying to respect and honor, because we actually value our Lutheran heritage and our theological orthodoxy. But at the same time, we don't want that to be a barrier for people to bring them into the local church and experience the gospel as we're sharing it. So this is the unfortunate reality. We know this. The LCMS is not the biggest Lutheran denomination in America. The biggest is the ELCA, and we're not here to trash on them, but they've got a very, very, very different view, a very different brand than what we have. And would a common person seeing the word LCMS on a street sign, would they think that, what does that even mean, right? Versus ELCA. So is that actually portraying the brand? Now, I would say this: if it was an amazing brand, if that was the brand that everybody loved, I'd be down for a conversation like that. Maybe that is the brand that we would all want to be, but that would require intentionality at a national level to say, we want the brand of LCMS to be, one of the best church brands that you could possibly imagine. That would require a very different mindset, I think, than what we've embodied so far. Not to throw anybody under the bus, but I don't know if it's considered to be one of the most attractive brands out there right now. So I think it's kind of a both and approach. There's nothing that stops a local congregation or a circuit to say we want to use LCMS as their branding if they think that that's what's going to attract people and start them to have, relationships where you can share the gospel with them. If you think that'll do it, then do it. Give it a try. I'd love to hear your experiment and see how well that panned out. But
yeah, I mean, there was a day that LCMS worked, that if you put LCMS
where that LCMS cross would have been the thing that you wanted out there, right? So yeah, I'm not writing it off. I think it's a beautiful vision, Tim, actually,
Yeah, it is. If reimagined for a post-Christian secular day and age, I think the LCMS brand works in Midwest, mostly Christian America. And it worked in our past story because it was a brand of innovation and care and cross-cultural love and new starts and all of that when we were starting, one church every 2 days back in the late 40s into the early 50s. We were rolling in those days. Leadership development through our respective universities and Concordias, seminaries. We were really, really kicking butt, but that unfortunately is not where we're at right now. And we want people to get to know who Jesus is and fall in love with the gospel. And then we'll be like, all right, here's our story. Here's that Luther guy. And here's why we believe in the law gospel distinctives and our tension field theology, all of that. We need to have a little bit more of an open hand. This is one of the cases we're making right now to say at the district and even the urban suburban area, at circuit level, you guys need to have a little bit more freedom because our doctrine gives a lot of responsibility to the local church, but you still need one another. We still are better when we walk together, especially in our geographic circuit location. So it's a both and. We're not here. One last thing. We're not here lobbying to say get rid of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod as a respective brand or organizing principle. That's not what we're saying at all. We're just saying there needs to be more freedom for circuits kind of establishing a separate brand to engage their respective areas. Jack?
And the type of collaboration that we're talking about, we don't want, the key is that this is a winsome voluntary collaboration. And so collaboration, if it's not done voluntary, if it's not done because the local church feels that it's going to bless them to do that, then you don't do it. You keep that freedom in place because, there's a flip side to every coin. It is possible that a collaboration could lead you down a path that you don't want to go. And you may, you may find that you're adopting things that you don't want to adopt and only doing it for the sake of collaboration. We're not saying that. We're saying that all things being equal, a healthy, we're all in the same doctrine here. We all have figured out in our minds what healthy collaboration looks like. We know that there are some systems that if we, you do this experiment, we do this experiment, we come together to figure out which one makes sense. That's the type of collaboration that we're looking at.
Collaboration is not going to work without the right leader and leadership team in place.
Well, let's lean on that, Tim. Let's talk about what would a perfect circuit leader look like? What would be your vision on that?
Well, right now the language is circuit visitor. I think it should be circuit leader in mission. That could be a change we would make. But
I might suggest circuit coach.
A circuit coach could definitely be an opportunity. But visitor kind of sounds like, well, I'm going to stop in and honestly, have coffee. Have coffee. It's a little bit more of a passive. It's a little bit more of a passive rather than proactive relationship. Yeah. So I would hope that the future for a circuit visitor or coach or whatever, they would be the healthiest and most balanced leader or one of the most balanced leaders in the room. And so to get to that point, you're going to need some qualitative and quantitative analysis. Qualitative, what do other people say about that leader? Is he leading well in the local church? Does he collaborate well? And then the quantitative analysis could be using some sort of an assessment like the Harrison Behavioral Assessment, or which I'll just pause in the Harrison. We need pastors with the right combination of passive and aggressive traits, or passive and dynamic traits.
Yeah.
And right now, a lot of our circuit visitors, based on my research, are sometimes the most imbalanced passively. And so
why do you think that is, Tim? What do you think is the genesis of that?
Yeah, well, this is just observation. I've had some interviews with this, but my observation is that the unspoken truth, the shadow truth, is that a lot of pastors are insecure. They feel overwhelmed, and they live by shame rather than the love of the gospel. And they'd rather not have someone kind of poke at them and prod and challenge them to dream new dreams, to reach new people with the gospel. And so I think a lot of times most passive circuit visitor is chosen because he won't challenge in love. So,
and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, it is.
So
it is. Like Christian, unfortunately, we have institutionalized Christian kindness as like the norm. We got to find the most kind guy here. And the synonym for kindness is many times passivity. Yeah. Right. And so the Harrison would help you find those who have the right level of aggressive kind of challenge orientation, the right level of frankness, and the right level of follow through to, again, I think leaning on the example of a coach, to not tell you what to do, never tell you what to do, but to shine a mirror back and to help the pastor prioritize the right next step. And then if that circuit visitor had in mind and could keep the vision of X amount of new starts, X amount of leaders raised up. So the why, Jack, between the churches is very, very closely connected. Man, that's a powerful circuit visitor. Yeah. Wouldn't it be?
Wouldn't it be cool if there was so much collaboration and so much relational health between circuit churches that they could even share the same mission statement? That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That I think it's not a pipe dream.
Yeah.
I think we could find shared language that would lead us to uniquely execute that. So we're walking through at Christ Greenfield. We got 20 and 20 vision, so 20 campuses in 20 years. It's going to be smaller, centrally supported, all of that. And we walk through with Matt Peoples. Shout out to Matt Peoples. If you want to engage with a guy who's doing a lot in the micro church and micro site, and then has good organizational skills to help teams like ours put together the negotiables and non-negotiables for a multi-site, or maybe you could even say a circuit approach. Talk to our listeners about what we said are the four the DNA that must move between congregations. Jack, do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. So the first was word and sacrament worship. So somehow
seems like we should be able to agree on that, right?
Yes. and so right there, right off the bat, I don't think that any circuit would disagree that every church should have word and sacrament worship, right? So,
useful. Okay. What
preach
else?
The gospel and administer the sacraments properly.
Amen.
And bada boom. So that's the first non-negotiable. The second was, and if you were to think about this in the context of a circuit, there might be a challenge there, but shared mission statement and values, right? So we've put a lot of effort into cultivating a mission statement that says this is why Christ Greenfield exists, and then we have 6 core values that we put together. If you didn't have a mission and a value set, because I think a lot of churches, Jack, need to dust the cobwebs off of their mission. Absolutely.
And then I don't think many of them have shared values. So this could be something they do between churches. Go ahead.
Let's pause on that, because I'm thinking in terms of a circuit and a circuit visitor. I don't think that it's right for a circuit to impose a mission statement on a church per se. But what I would say is that you better have one that you're in love with. That's what I would kind of say if you were a circuit visitor, a circuit coach, and I'm trying to coach a pastor. Do you have a mission statement and values that you're absolutely in love with and motivates the people of your church? I'm not saying it has to be mine. I'm not saying it has to be the one that we all share here, but do you have one that just absolutely lights you up? And that would be an area of challenge. Not that you have to just be a clone of what we're doing, but that you have one. And so that's an area of healthy accountability right there, right?
So word and sacraments and mission and values are shared. What's the third non-negotiable?
Leadership development system in our particular case. So an intentional leadership development strategy that we have in the Christ Greenfield context. We say, there's a pathway to serve, lead, coach, direct, and, even go into an executive leadership team that leads the whole church. So a defined leadership pathway and develop intentional development along that pathway. Is that something training that could be shared across a circuit? Could you learn how to develop leaders in a very similar way and develop similar language? Now, here's the beauty of it. If you do that, now you've got shared resources, right? Now you've got content that can be shared and an even more robust system because you got multiple entities that are speaking into how it works well and doesn't work well, right?
Yeah. I think the shadow side right now, and I'm sorry to be a agitator on this point, leader or theologian, president, it's not about, we can get the content, we can get it. Your role right now as a higher level leader, whether you're a district president or one of our professors or presidents, your role is to help the local church curate it well, because we can get it. Do you want to be at the table to help curate good content for our circuits and for our churches trying to multiply disciples? I pray the answer is yes. And so those are our three non-negotiables. And then the fourth one kind of leans in. I know the fourth one kind of leans into freedom, though. Like, these are three very high level kind of boundaries: word and sacrament, mission, values, leadership development. They're the wide boundaries, all for the sake of the fourth one. What is that, Jack?
Community, right? Community, bringing people into a community expression. So interrelationships.
Unique. Right?
Unique. So we even said, hey, if it's a micro church, that could be community in a bar, right. Or it could be a community in a workplace. It could be an office. It could be in the local fitness center, right? So whatever brings people together in community, that community building, and right. Intentional development of community is a non-negotiable for us. Talk about that, Tim.
Absolutely. No, yeah. Well, there's freedom there. Community is our context. Yep. You actually understand your demographic. Who's your target family that your church is well positioned to reach? Do you have that kind of prime customer target kind of mapped out for your congregation? That gives so much freedom, permission for the respective leader. That's where the unique kind of brand under the wider brand would come into place. For instance, Christ Greenfield East Mesa, they are unique, not only in how they worship, where they worship, but the types of folks that they're starting to engage. There is some uniqueness or some similarity to Gilbert, but they're still, they realize they've got some ample freedom to uniquely engage their respective Cadence and Eastmark community here in the East Valley. So there's some examples, friends, of how circuits can work together. I pray that more district presidents, this is a big time invitation to you to start to reimagine the role of the circuit. We don't need to, this is a shout out to Chuck Mueller, spoke with him a little bit ago. We don't need to reinvent really any of the structure within the LCMS handbook per se. We just need to live into it. Forum, circuit convocations, and maybe then starting to give more respective training to discover, develop, and deploy the right type of circuit visitor, maybe as a coach, leader and mission. So we've given you a number of ideas. If the Unite Leadership Collective can help you in any way, just go to uniteleadership.org. Sharing is caring. All of your likes, your subscriptions, your downloads, all of that does a wonderful work in getting the word out. We are Lead Time, and we are leaders within the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, and we are having consistent, hopefully collegial, kind, hospitable, and yet challenging conversations about the future of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. It's a good day. Go and make it a great day. We'll see you next time on Lead Time. Thanks, Jack. Good work.
Peace.
You've been listening to Lead Time, a podcast of the Unite Leadership Collective. The ULC consults and brings together cohorts of congregations to build the culture, systems, and structures of intentional discipleship multiplication. To go deeper with us, create a free login on uniteleadership.org for access to exclusive materials and resources. Thanks for listening and stay tuned for next week's episode.